I had 6 points in my manifesto. I believe marriage is between one man and one woman.
Yeah.
And marriage is the best place to rear children.
So what action did they take?
They put me through a disciplinary.
Yeah.
And accused me of being homophobic.
I mean, are you homophobic?
No, absolutely not.
So they fired you, did they?
Yeah, absolutely, they fired me. They decided to really basically persecute me for making a very basic statement, based on my Christian values, of course.
I think people at home need to know that their rights are protected to believe what they want to believe.
Exactly.
Hello and welcome to today's podcast, God TV Together, where we discuss difficult and fascinating topics with great people. I'm joined by a great person today, Maureen Martin. Welcome to the show. Maureen is the president for the Christian People's Alliance, the CPA, which we're going to talk about later, Maureen. But here on the podcast, we always say it's really important that before we get and take information from someone, that we discern who they are. How do they know Jesus? So that's my first question, Maureen, is, how did you meet Jesus? What's your testimony?
Right, it's a long story.
Good. Well, we've got
some time.
We have, yeah.
Good, awesome. So my journey to Jesus didn't start out growing up in church. My family did not really know the Lord the way it would be my desire family should, as a child growing up in the family. But we did go to Sunday school. Now, my parents are from the Caribbean, and so they had some experience with church. They probably grew up in church themselves. My mother definitely did. But when she came to this country, she sort of abandoned her Christian roots. But she knew enough to send her children to Sunday school.
Wow.
That we were occasional attendees. We weren't like regular attendees. We'd show up sometimes. And we went on church trips. So this did not, for me, in my mind, qualify me as being a Christian. Okay, so, I grew up, did my normal thing, teenager, etc., was in the world, quite firmly in the world. I was not in any way a goody two-shoes in any way, shape or form.
Who was Maureen at that time? Who was the young Maureen?
I wasn't completely wayward. I had a strong sense of morality.
Right.
In the sense that I knew, having relations outside of marriage was wrong. This stopped me from doing it, but I knew it was wrong.
Right.
I knew it was wrong. I had a sense of morality, and I knew there was a God. I knew there was God. I didn't know much about Jesus, however, but I knew there was a God. I was absolutely sure about that. So, on my journey, I decided I was going to go to Canada. This is about when I was in my early 20s, about 22, 23. And I wanted a break from London. I've had enough of London. I was 19. I'd done quite a bit, actually. I bought my own flat with my sister.
Wow.
I was quite actually a progressive young person in the sense of where I was at that time in my life. And most people at 19 did not own their own flat. So I was quite well progressed in my life journey when it comes to my economic career and, those things. Morally, I was somewhere else, but in terms of other areas of my life, I was actually quite progressive. And I'd sort of had enough of London. I sort of wanted a break. So I had some family, not necessarily close family, in Canada. So I went to see them a couple of times over summer holidays. I decided I wanted to go there, Kingston, Ontario. I wanted to move there, another really radical thing for a young person to do. So by the time I made that decision, I was in my early 20s. And I was leaving my entire nuclear family and going there by myself. Quite a radical thing to do for a young person, actually. I was quite adventurous. People say silly, but adventurous. But so I decided to sell my portion of my flat to my sister to finance my trip. I went there, I did a fashion design diploma. I didn't just go there just to bum around with a knapsack or something. I actually went there and did a fashion design diploma, which I did. I got passed with honours.
Why your dress so nice today.
Well, thank you.
It's the first thing I noticed.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I love fashion. I'm a real fashionista. Anyway, so I did a fashion design diploma. I ended up getting married to Mr. Very, very extremely wrong.
In Canada?
Yes, in Canada. It didn't work out. But unfortunately, he ended up being a bit abusive. So that's a story in itself.
Yeah,
I had to get away from him. So I'll tell you a bit about that because it really did involve the Lord. Even though I didn't know the Lord yet, I knew he was working.
Wow.
I could see he was definitely working. And it turned out my mother was praying for me as well here while I was in Canada. Anyway, so I had to get away, but I had to get away in a way that he wasn't aware that I was really leaving,
Right.
if you understand.
I do, yeah.
Because abusive people can get even worse if they know that you're going to leave them, abandon them, or whatever. So at the time I was married to him, I finished my fashion design diploma, but I wasn't actually working yet. So I decided this plan to work, I needed a job because I needed to be able to get somewhere else, pay rent, etc., etc. So I got
Still in Canada?
Yeah, I was still in Canada by this time. So I got a job. I convinced him I needed to get a job. I didn't really need to work because he was providing financially quite well for both of us. But I told him I need to get a job. So he agreed, and I got a job. Even this time I'm planning in my head.
Wow, that
right?
must be scary to have
I was planning because I thought I need to get a job because I need to be able to, I'm not going to go live in the street. That's not my thing.
Right.
I can't do that. And I didn't have any family there to run to. I couldn't just get on a plane and go back to mum and dad's because they weren't round the corner. They're across the Atlantic. So I just couldn't leave, just like that. So I had to have a plan. So I got a job. Then I had been in the job for a little while. So this plan's going on in my head. So I decided to tell him I was going to leave him, okay? And at that time, we owned a rental property that was in my name.
Right.
And I knew I could not manage financially the rent on that rental property. It was too much for what I was earning in my little job. So this is what I put to him. This is why I know God was working. I said to him, I'm going to leave you, but I need you to take the ownership of that property off me. And I was shocked when he said yes. I made the appointment with the solicitor immediately before he changed his mind, and we transferred ownership.
Wow.
Believe that? I know God was working because no way he would have agreed to that. Anyway, so I carried on, the relationship was normal until the day I was going to leave. He helped me move and everything.
No way.
But you know what he was thinking? He was thinking that we were going to continue our relationship while we lived in separate places.
Okay.
This is what he had in his head, not what I had in mine. So by the time he moved me and he was sitting there, they say we're going to continue this conversation or relationship. I said, well, I'll go then. This is it. And he left. I've never seen him since. No, wow. I've not set eyes on him since that day. 27 years ago, I've not set eyes on this man. That's how much God was moving in that situation.
Wow.
Amazing. Anyway, so to the point where I got saved. 7 years on, I'd been in Canada for at the 7-year point. I'd left the ex-husband, but when I was living with him, I used to watch Reverend K.C. Price, who was a media online, not online, but television.
Tele-evangelist, you can say it. It's got connotations, but
tele-evangelist, yeah. But he was very good.
Good.
So he was living...
Some of them are, apparently.
Yeah, well, God TV works.
Well, there you go.
It works. TV evangelism does actually work. So he had a very good life. I thought, he's living really well. So, and I want to live like that. He's living better than I am. So in order to get what he's got, I need to do what he's doing. Very logical, that's how I think. So I decided one day, okay, from this day on, I'm a Christian.
Just decided?
Just decided like that. From this day on, I'm a Christian.
Amen.
And I did what I thought Christians, tried to do anyway.
Right.
What Christians I found the Bible and decided I wanted to start praying. I'll be praying for like 10 minutes. Like, wow, this is long. This is too long, but 10 minutes, I'm like, I've prayed enough now, haven't I? I have no idea what to pray even. I had no idea, whatever. I'd not even heard of the Synod prayer.
Well, I didn't know that you part of your testimony was through televangelism, which is incredible because, I mean, I'm all for media evangelism, so, yeah, that's incredible. In that narrative, so you're still in Canada at that point?
Still in Canada.
And then what happened after that? So you gave your life to Christ, like in a way that you would as a planner.
Well, actually, I hadn't necessarily given my life to Christ yet.
You just said you were a Christian.
Yes, I just said I was a Christian. I hadn't actually, made the confession. Bible says you do confess and believe, right? I believe I hadn't confessed yet.
Right.
So technically, yes. I mean, I'd made a decision in my heart, obviously, but I hadn't made the confession because the two go hand in hand. So by this time, let's fast forward a bit. I'd left the ex, and immediately after leaving, I decided I need to go to church now, obviously, because that's what Christians do, right? They go to church. And there was a United Church not too far from where I'd moved to, new address after I'd left. So I went there one Sunday, as you do. And this preacher was talking about birds and bees. I don't know what she was talking about, quite frankly. I don't know what she was talking about. It was some weird stuff. I don't know what she was saying. So it was church. So I said, okay, I'll be back next week. It's church, right? I didn't know any different. I just thought this was church. So I was working in a bridal store at that time. And one of the brides would bring her mother in to look at her dress. And her mother started to, while we were in this conversation in the store, showing the dress and et cetera, the mother started talking about a full gospel church she attended in where I lived in Kingston. Like, really? Where? She told me, I said, okay, I'm coming. I said to her, is it full gospel? She said, yeah, okay, I'm coming. She said, okay. She's like, sure, all right. So we exchanged numbers and she picked me up the Sunday and that was the church I attended.
Wow.
As soon as I went in, heard the music, this is it.
Right.
And that church actually got saved.
Right.
And I got baptised.
Right.
And I tell you how I actually got saved. I was in the choir. It was a funeral, unfortunately. One of my church sisters, her son had tragically passed away, a young man. He was only 18, I think, in a car crash. So this is the funeral. And the pastor gave an altar call. And I said to myself, I need to say this. I need to confess this. So I confessed it. I just thought, I need to say this. And I said it. And that was the point of my salvation. Amazing. That was the point.
So how long ago was that?
That was 27 years ago.
Wow, incredible.
27 years ago. And that was the point of my salvation.
Incredible. Thank you for sharing it. So the reason you're here today is because we're going to talk about politics, I think. And something controversial happened to you in politics. But before, people want to stay and they definitely want to hear about what happened to you, what's going on with you, and also, I want to hear some of what you think around faith and politics as well. But before we get there, how did you then get from, Canada 27 years later to, working in politics and, you were a mayoral candidate for Lewisham, correct? So what got you interested in politics? And in a short version, how do we get, 27 years, yeah.
Yeah, we'll come down to 27 years.
Yeah, right. Which is impoable, but
exactly.
Give us a feeling for
Absolutely, yeah. So 7 years after I was living with the ex-husband, 7 years saved, so 14 years in Canada altogether.
Wow.
So in 2003, I came back here. It was supposed to have been a 3-month holiday, but it turned out I stayed because my mother needed me. She had some health challenges. She needed me. So God just said, stay. Yeah. So I stayed. And whilst I was in Canada, Canadian Christians are a bit more politically engaged than Christians here. So I was a bit more aware of what was going on politically while I was in Canada. But I just gotten my citizenship before I left, actually.
Wow.
So I actually have dual citizenship. But before that, I couldn't vote because I wasn't a citizen. But I was still aware of what was going on politically. But coming back to this country, I found that my Christian counterparts weren't as engaged politically as maybe I was. And then I looked around at the political landscape in this country. I decided I can't vote for any of these parties because they're just not reflecting my Christian values. In the Conservative Party, at that point, even in 2004, 2003, were not really reflective of my values. Certainly not Labour, certainly not Liberal, certainly not Greens, all the other, ABC parties out there. They were just not parties I can vote for in good conscience. And to illustrate my unusual stance, as being a member of the Let's Say Black Church, you want to put it that way. In 2008 rather, than Barack Obama burst on the scene. My first question about him wasn't the colour of his skin and how great that was. My first question was, what does he believe?
Right.
What does he stand for? So I looked up, I didn't know that much about Democrats and Republicans at that point, having lived in Canada, more Canadian politics. But I didn't know that much about Democrats and Republicans. So I just Googled it. I said, what do Democrats believe? As soon as I saw the list, I said, oh no, there's no way I can support this man. Pro-LGBT, pro-unfettered immigration, pro-everything that I'm anti, pro-abortion. I said, no way I can support this man. I don't care what colour his skin is. And of course, I got a lot of pushback from my fellow church members and everyone else who was the same colour as me. A lot of pushback saying that, well, he's black. I said, well, so what? He just doesn't believe what I believe. As a Christian, I can't vote for that. These things are complete anti-Christian. So I cannot support those values. So going towards forwarding, 2015, I'd already joined the Christian People's Alliance by this point as a member, because I was looking for a party that reflected my values, and someone told me about this. So I joined as a member only. I wasn't really active in the party, just a member. And so 2015, there was a general election that year. So I was looking for a CPA candidate to vote for, obviously, in that area. And there just wasn't one. So I went to the website and I was looking for a candidate. Nothing mentions, Lewisham East is my constituency. So I said, OK, maybe they need some help. Maybe I'll offer to help, right? Being Christian.
That's where it always starts.
Exactly. That's where it always started. And it did start. Before I knew what happened, the leader of the party was on the phone to me, asking me if I wanted to be the candidate in Lewisham East. I was like, almost dropped the phone. I said, what? I said, yes. I heard yes coming out of my mouth. Okay, so I was in, absolutely in. So I got all the paperwork together. He helped me get all the paperwork together. And that year I stood as a candidate for the Christian People's Alliance in Lewisham East. Obviously I didn't get that many votes, but that's not the point. And the point was from that moment on, I stayed in the CPA, became an active member of the CPA, and to the point where we get to what happened in my case, the mayoral candidacy in Lewisham East, being a member of the CPA, and knowing that when you stand for mayor of any council or any county or whatever, it gives you a great opportunity to get name recognition and for distribution of your policies, because it goes to every registered voter in that borough. It's not just in your constituency, it's in the borough. So standing as a mayoral candidate is very valuable in that sense. You do have to pay a bit for the booklet that they distribute, but it's worth it. You can't pay for that amount of advertising, what they charge. I mean, just thousands, millions even. So my manifesto went out to all registered voters in Lewisham, about 200,000 people.
So now we're getting into the square of the issue, really.
Exactly,
so you're probably thinking, right, I'm on a political journey that's more about CPA than being mayor, really. You know?
Exactly.
It's about representation of a Christian voice, a Christian party, truly conservative values.
Exactly.
So you put together a manifesto and then you send it out. What happens then?
Well, what happened, and what happens normally is your manifesto just goes out and people vote for you, don't vote for you. But in my case, something else happened, because I had 6 points in my manifesto. Point number 3 was just basically saying, I believe marriage is between one man and one woman. And marriage is the best place to rear children, the safest place to rear children. To me, that's just a very basic, fundamental statement to make. It's not rocket science. However, as you can imagine, my manifesto having gone out to 200,000 people, you'd imagine some people in that group would not agree with me. Fair enough. That's what...
probably strongly disagree with you.
Very strongly, But that's okay. That's what a free society is about. Isn't it? Free exchange of ideas and views. You're free to disagree with me, I'm free to disagree with you, but where we should be free to express our opinions without being restricted or persecuted for them. That's the idea of freedom of speech. However, in this case, yes, I mean, people disagreed with me. Fine, no problem. We can have a discussion. We can have a discourse. However, somebody put my manifesto on Twitter. I didn't put it there. They put it there. And someone who was a customer of the company I worked for, who didn't live in the borough, by the way, out of borough, complained to my employer at the time. So there are 3 complaints that were made. And my employer, instead of saying something very basic like, yes, we appreciate she said that, we don't agree with her, but we value inclusion.
Yeah.
That means inclusion of views we don't agree with. Instead of saying that, they decided to really basically persecute me for making a very basic statement. And that is based on my Christian values, of course.
So what action did they take?
What action? Well, they put me through a disciplinary.
Yeah.
And accused me of being homophobic.
Right.
And
well, how would you answer that? I mean, are you homophobic?
No, absolutely not. My answer to that was, my views were based on my Christian values. Therefore, I'm protected under the Equality Act. So you should be protecting my right to say this, not persecuting me for saying it. And my views are in no way homophobic or discriminatory, is what they called it. Okay, I didn't break the law in any way. I didn't advocate harm to anyone. So you actually saying I'm being homophobic and discriminatory has no foundations. Because you should, as I said, as I told them, you should be protecting my views because they're based on my Christian values. But
whether they agree or not.
Exactly.
But what do you think about, because I guess you understand why they were going down that route, and do you understand why people might find that difficult in today's culture? And do you have like an answer for that? You know, like, because you said you're clearly not homophobic, but I can see how that community might find that a difficult statement, you know, that marriage is only between a man and a woman and the safest place to bring up children. Whether I agree or not, you know, and I think statistics probably stand on your side as well from what I've researched. That's still a difficult statement in today's culture. So can you just say a bit more why you believe that and why that's important and why it isn't homophobic? Yeah, because the basics of our society is a family, okay? A man and a woman produce children. Other bundles don't produce children. So in order for society to continue, we need to propagate, okay? If everyone was in other models of relationships, the human race would die out. So we need families, we need men and women to come together in marriage and form families to produce the next generations. So that could be no more homophobic, it's just facts, it's practical, and it's for the continuation of the human race. You know, that's just a foundational fact that even if you don't agree with me in terms of what I said, you don't have to agree with that, because that's a fact. Even what I said is a fact, but if you don't agree with what I said initially about marriage, that is a fact. We need to propagate and continue the human race. Other models cannot do that. Men and men can't do that. Women and women can't do that. Men and women, the only ones who can propagate and produce children. Okay? So that's my answer to that, basically. Yeah, I'm just trying to be the other side of the party. I know exactly. And like it's what I believe. I'm not trying to stand like just with you, because I think people at home need to know that their rights are protected to believe what they want to believe. Exactly, yeah. But also, I'd like other people to see that as Christians, certainly around these issues, is whether I agree with them or not, I've decided in my life that God is king. And so therefore the Bible is what I'm going to, take my truth from. Now that might now stand in opposition with societal truth that I sort of understand, because I've grown up with it in a different way than maybe you have, and again, it's one of those issues that wasn't an issue when I was growing up. If you were gay, you were gay. It didn't, just nobody talked about it. And then all of a sudden we're talking about it again. But from the perspective of, because a Christian stands up for a biblical belief. So then what happens with your company? So you go through a disciplinary. Where are you at with that now?
Right. Well, the case is all settled, and I'll tell you what happened. With the help of the Christian Legal Centre, of course I had to sue them. I mean, there's no way I could just let that go.
So
Yeah.
they fired you, did they?
Yeah, absolutely. They fired me. I appealed, as you do.
So was it instant dismissal as well? So did you get some warnings, or was it just...
No, it wasn't a warning per se, because my record at that point had been unblemished. I was a really excellent employee.
So they've just given you gross misconduct?
Yeah, exactly. So I was an excellent employee. I'd been working there for 13 years. My performance was excellent. I was a manager, so I managed 8 people and about, 10,000 properties. It was a housing association. So my performance at that point was excellent. I'd never had any issues with HR or disciplinaries before. No one had logged grievances against me. I'd not logged grievances against anybody else. In 13 years of being employed by this company, I had an unblemished record.
Yeah, well,
so they
rare.
Exactly. So they couldn't actually penalise me for any previous, events or activities I'd done, because there just wasn't any. And just to point out, all this was done off work hours. It wasn't like I was on my, lunchtime, doing a Twitter rant or anything like that. It's all off work hours in my own time. So you're quite right. They fired me for gross misconduct, for being homophobic and discriminating against the LGBT community. And I appealed, as you must do in order to bring a case to the employment tribunal. You must appeal first, and then you can log a case with the tribunal. So I appealed. Of course, they upheld their own appeal, because they were not going to change their mind, are they? So
that's like an internal appeal.
Yeah, exactly.
So there's
no exactly.
external... No,
it's all very incestuous, and they all agree with themselves. Of course they are. Yeah. So they upheld their own decision. So I was, at that point, being assisted by the Christian Legal Centre anyway. Excellent organisation. Please, I employ anyone to support them. They're very, very good.
Yeah. How did you feel at the time? Because you talk about this very matter of fact, but it can't have been great,
It wasn't, but you know what? God was with me all through it. And I'll tell you what happened just before I got the call from HR, that call, the first call. Just before I got the call from HR, a couple of days before, I'd woken up and I heard in my spirit, God will give you an answer of peace. I knew where that came from. It came from the story of Joseph speaking to Pharaoh, interpreting his dreams. So I thought, that's nice. I don't know why you gave that to me, Lord, but I know where it came from. And so as the days, followed and this thing started to transpire, what God was saying to me, I'm going to answer you by peace. You're going to have peace throughout the entire thing. And by this, you'll know everything's going to work out in your favour. This is exactly what happened. I had a peace.
Jesus gets in the boat with you.
Yes.
He doesn't stop the storm.
Absolutely. So I had a peace throughout the entire ordeal. And this is why I was able to really kind of stick to my guns and stand up for what I believed in. Because there was a temptation with the threat of losing your job. Because first of all, they don't fire you immediately. What they do, they suspend you with pay while they conduct their so-called investigation. So for about 2 weeks, you're suspended with pay. So in that 2 weeks, you could be thinking, maybe I should, back down, or maybe I should just apologise, or... None of those thoughts came to my mind at all. I was determined to stand for what I believe for, and that's because I had this internal peace going on, because God had told me he would answer me by peace. This is exactly what happened. So I was able to stand on what I believed. I was very combative, if you like, during my disciplinaries and my appeals, because I was absolutely 100% sure that what I said was true. So I was not going to back down. And, they're trying to trap you into kind of admitting that what you said was maybe, I misspoke. No, I didn't misspeak. Or trying to get you to apologise in a very roundabout way.
Do you think they would have fired you if you had, softened your position, or said, I won't do it again, or, shown some contrition? Do you think they would have still fired you?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Yeah,
I think they were determined to do it anyway.
Wow.
To make an example of me.
Okay.
So if I had done that, it would have been a double sword for me.
What did your friends and, colleagues think and say at the time?
Well, ironically, when you are suspended, one of the conditions of suspension, you don't communicate with your colleagues.
Right.
It's very, it's very harsh. They say you can't communicate with your colleagues.
Yeah. That can't be legal. They can't tell you can't talk to your friends, right?
Well, I mean, I did communicate with some of the colleagues I had that were friends.
Right.
Generally,
You would see them at church or what?
Well, there's only one person I worked with that I attended church. She'd already left at that point,
Right.
so she wasn't actually an employee. So the other people, there's only one other lady that she didn't actually attend church, but we were sort of friends outside of the workplace. But most of the people I knew were work buddies, if you like, work friends.
Yeah.
That I only spoke to in the course of my job. So, but I heard afterwards, after the entire situation, was that most of them did not agree with what happened to me.
Yeah.
But because they're already employed and they have their own jobs to think about,
Right.
The story,
Yeah.
that they really couldn't speak out in my favour. But
so where'd you go from there? You've been fired, you've been excluded from, communication. They've made a decision, they've done an appeal. What comes next?
Well, what next was, with the help of the Christian Legal Centre, we did make an application to the Employment Tribunal to bring a case against my former employer. And that application is going through, no problem. But then earlier this year, they made an offer to settle outside of court.
Okay.
Which, of course, they would, because I had a strong case. Not only that, but financially, they were looking at a lot of money.
Yeah.
I was getting my legal assistance free, but they weren't.
No, the barrister fees are enormous.
Oh, they are.
I've been through employment tribunals, and what people don't understand is, did you settle?
Yes, I did settle.
But I want people to know why that's not a bad thing and why the employer would do that. Is in a case where you're not 100% that you would win the case, the cost of taking it to court and then the cost of them paying your legal fees and then any settlement is so enormous that there's a huge incentive for them to do that in terms of if they're spending the government purse, that is their strategy. If they're going to lose, they will always make an offer. I can't say that for this specific situation, but in my experience of going through these processes, I've been in the situation where we've done that. It's not an acceptance of your wrongness.
No. They didn't really accept liability per se.
Right. They said you've got to accept this, but not say that they're liable.
Exactly. Yeah. We did negotiate on the price, of course, quite aggressively. So I got what I wanted in terms of the amount. And the nice thing about it was the NDA, the non-disclosure agreement. The only thing I couldn't say was how much I settled for. Anything else I could say.
Okay.
I would not have settled if that wasn't the case.
Yeah.
So I could talk
you can talk about the case, you can talk about what happened.
The only thing I can't say is how much,
Yeah.
which is not a problem.
No, we don't want to know that.
Exactly. So the settlement was to my liking, my satisfaction. The NDA was scrutinised, every jot and tittle was gone over by the CLC to make sure it was what it said it was, what it said on the tin, and I settled. What
were you taking to court? So what did you take to the tribunal? Was it discrimination or what were you saying? You fired me incorrectly because...
Yeah, you discriminated against me as a Christian.
The Christian.
Yeah,
okay.
Because my rights under the Equality Act were being ignored in favour of other rights. This is why the Equality Act doesn't really work, because some characteristics are more equal than others, it appears.
Yeah.
Does it?
Yeah.
Exactly. So the Equality Act does not actually work.
Yeah.
Unless you actually treat them all the same,
yeah.
Which employers and other people are not. They treat some in favour of others, as we've known, Christian or Christianity or religion.
Well, there are things called protected characteristics, but when you name protected characteristics, aren't you then... that in itself is an act of... I don't know what to call it... you're excluding those people and putting them in their own categories,
exactly.
Which is a type of discrimination in itself.
Exactly. So everyone else who doesn't fit into that group of 9, I believe it is.
Right.
Where are they?
Right.
They're excluded.
Yeah.
So it really doesn't work. And when it comes to religion, again, all religions are created equal in terms of this Equality Act.
Right.
Islam is a higher ranking than Christianity.
Why do you think that? Why would you say
Well,
that?
where was the last time we heard someone talk about Christophobia?
Right.
There's a word called
Christian
Islamophobia.
I hear people talk about Christian persecution,
Yeah.
but not in the West, and it's a really interesting subject because your case in itself is an example of
Absolutely
discrimination against, or the harsher word is persecution. And you know, I've always found it really hard to put, you know, losing your job versus losing your life, because when we say persecuted Christians, we're just putting everybody into that category.
Yeah. Exactly.
And I don't want to be dismissive of people in countries where, you know, they're losing their life for their faith, but it's still a form of persecution.
It is.
And you're not the only example. In fact, you're not even the only example we're interviewing this week.
There's lots. Unfortunately, there's too many.
So we were talking about this earlier. Why do you think as a society that we've got to where we've got to? You know, rose-tinted glasses on, you and I grew up in a world where I thought we didn't really talk about identity politics anymore. You know, like we didn't talk about race, we didn't talk about gender, we didn't talk about faith in a way that was other than everyone's equal, everything should be fair. You know, like, and I'd understood that when we're not talking about it anymore, that's when we're doing good. And it seems like we've become really polarised again around race, faith and identity. And I'd just love to hear your thoughts about how you think we've got there, and you know, how do you deal with that with CPA, you know, in your like manifesto, in your politics now?
Indeed, yeah. Society's become much more polarised. And I believe it's that the enemy's old plan to divide and conquer.
Right.
Because the more you divide people, and identity politics is what's really happening here.
Yeah.
So instead of all kind of seeing ourselves as one big group, humanity,
right,
now we've kind of intersectionalised ourselves into all these different little fractions, all fighting for our own little corner, forgetting that while we're fighting each other, there's a bigger plan to harm us all, really. So you're quite right, when I was growing up, these things just weren't really a big deal. You know, we just got along.
It's not that they didn't exist.
Yeah.
They just felt at the outskirts of society. Yeah. You know, I would never say that racism didn't exist. Of course it does, you know, but it wasn't like the, you know, general population. It wasn't like we were expected to, I had a guest called Amy Gallagher where she'd been asked specifically to interrogate her whiteness. Well, I've kind of been asked that as well. Like, you know, not in those exact words, but, you know, a bit of shorthand is, you know, that I might need to examine my own prejudice or my own privilege and things like that. And it's quite surprising how, if you follow that line of thinking, that all of a sudden it racialises your thinking. Because now I'm thinking, when I see somebody, oh, you know, there's an Asian person or a black person or, you know, whatever race, and how might I have prejudice? And so I start to act a bit weird or different or not myself. You know, I don't think it's quite right.
It's not. It's very unhealthy.
So what are we going to do about it, Maureen?
Well, I think it's a lot of, really, Marxism that's creeping into the society again. Because the whole Marxist premise is to find a boogeyman.
Right.
Someone to blame everything on, right?
Yeah.
In the Marxist proletariat, it was the capitalist, right?
Yeah.
It was the one who owned the businesses.
Yeah.
They were the author of everyone's despair. So they're the ones we have to kind of persecute and get rid of, so everyone's equal.
Right.
So now we've focused on other things, and in our community generally, it's the race issue. So now we've found another boogeyman. It's the white straight man. He's the boogeyman.
Yeah.
He's everyone's problem, isn't he? He's white and he's straight and he's male.
Yeah.
Oh my.
Toxic masculinity.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So he's the one that everyone has focused their attention on now.
Yeah.
Because he's the problem.
Yeah.
Right? He doesn't want anyone to be, you know, explore their sexuality, quote unquote.
Yeah.
He's white. Oh my word, you know, it's a cardinal sin.
So how is that? How does that look in the black community? And I know you can't speak on behalf of our whole peoples, but I am interested, your experience at church and, your friends, and at least speak from your experience, as a strong, independent black woman, like, what does the opposite side of the racialisation of politics look like?
Right, I'll challenge that for you, strong black woman. Listen, I see myself, first of all, as a Christian.
Amen. I apologise.
Yeah, don't apologise. Don't apologise. But you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, but it creeps in, and
exactly.
It's trying to use the right language, but still falling over yourself.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying.
It's all good, Maureen. People at home are learning from us having this conversation right now.
Exactly. I didn't want to kind of make you apologise. What I wanted, I just want to highlight.
I'm good.
Highlight that because I see myself first of all as a Christian.
Well, then that's how I see you.
I'm just a strong woman.
That's how I see you.
Exactly. I'm a strong woman. So we keep putting people in these boxes all the time.
Yeah.
And we should just see people as people.
You're right.
Martin Luther King's dream was that people were judged by the content of their character and not the colour of their skin.
Amen.
His dream has been decimated. His dream has been flipped on its head, and we are doing the opposite now. As you were asking me the question about my fellow church believers are very racialised. They see everything in terms of their colour, to the point that they would vote for people based upon the colour of skin and not necessarily on their politics per se.
Right.
That's why a lot of black Christians vote for Labour Party, because they see the Labour Party as being, a party for minorities. But have you ever read the manifesto? Most of us say, no, I've never read the manifesto.
Right.
Maybe you should read it because you'll find out quite a bit about the Labour Party. Their views are very anti-Christian. But you want to vote for them just because they're supposed to be advocating for minorities. In fact, they don't really even do that. So they're very racialised, the black church, and they see everything in terms of this thing called race. In fact, they won't get involved in anything politically unless it's connected to race, which I find quite amazing. And I'll give you a really good example. When in America they overturned Roe versus Wade, which is a major thing that happened, not just for America, but globally, that, the superpower, America, would actually overturn an abortion law for their entire nation. That was huge, major. That weekend, my church had in its news bulletin, instead of celebrating that, they celebrated the murder of George Floyd. My chin was on the floor and I saw that. I was the only one, of course, even surprised by that. I was like, good gracious me.
Well, we sort of imported that Black Lives Matter movement, who have now been shown to be disgraced, in terms of how they've used the funds and what their motivation was. Or is, and that's a whole other podcast, and if people want to learn about that, there's other people that can talk about it better than I can. But how did that infiltrate politics in the UK? Because Black Lives Matters was, as far as I'm concerned or aware, was about a guy in America that wasn't a very nice guy that got manhandled and has been proven in court to have been murdered by the guy that,
Derek Chauvin.
That overused, too much excessive force. Now, there's even debate about that, right? But I'm going with what at least the court has said. Course, there is an injustice there, but it should be about a policeman and another man, right? Like it's the identification is the policeman and not a policeman, not a white policeman and a black guy, right? So how did that get imported into UK politics, and how is it still affecting it?
Well, you have to remember, historically, we've had our own issues where that's concerned. Black people being, harassed by the police, supposedly. So we had our own issues where that's concerned in the past. And even when you look at the Brixton riots back in the 80s, they were fermented because of excessive police force used against the predominantly black community of Brixton. At that time, Brixton actually got very kind of gentrified lately, but those riots were fermented and that was the catalyst to what happened back then. So we've had our own issues. So what the BLM movement did, it just kind of added fire or kindling, if you want, to what was already there,
Right.
already here, if you like.
Right.
So those who are in that way minded were happy to jump on the BLM bandwagon, as it were, and kind of continue the narrative of police being systemically racist against black people, black men in particular.
Yeah, and what do people say about that now? Like, you know, George Floyd and because obviously that narrative has really flipped since the court case, just because of you know, how many drugs he was on, and you know, some of the other facts of how he lived his life and how he treated women, and you know, like this wasn't a good guy.
No.
He didn't deserve to die, but he wasn't a good guy. Like, you know, it's almost like they're not reading the manifesto. It's like, oh, the context is really important.
Yeah.
Like, how are we going to make changes in politics? Like, you know, I'm asking you big questions that you might not have answers to, where, you know, we have a party as Christians that we don't get dragged away by movements like, you know, Black Lives Matters, or, you know, some kind of identity politics, whether that's race, gender or faith. Ideally, we want to support a party that is grounded in biblical values, right? So like, how do we deal with that?
Well, in terms of the CPA, for instance, we are very diverse in terms of the party makeup, and it's reflected in, you know, the party itself and the leadership, and we are a reflection of the body of Christ, really, because it's a. I use the word rainbow because rainbow is, you know, God's idea. Exactly.
Rainbow represents hope.
Exactly. It got hijacked by some other agendas, but the rainbow is God. So we're a rainbow of all races and, you know, cultures. That's what the church should be. Paul said there's neither Jew nor Greek, bond nor female, we're all one in Christ Jesus. However, back to the issue of how do you fix this problem? It has to be fixed on a cultural level. It's a cultural issue. So we have to really work on infiltrating or re-infiltrating, if you like, the culture. Because the culture's been taken over, as we can see. And the cultural narratives have been really hijacked by certain agendas. So we have to kind of work to get the culture back, as it were, or to make sure our voice is heard in the culture. You know, politics downstream from culture. So if you have the culture, you basically have the politics. So we really have to work on re-infiltrating or affecting the culture. You can't always do that from a governmental level. Because
what are some of the policies, though, that CPA have that you think, you know, would help lead culture in the right way? For example, you know, around education, or you know, like you know, the separation of you know, church and government isn't the same here as it is in America.
No, it's not. It's not.
You know, it's like one and the same, really.
It should be, yeah.
And like, so what are your you know, key manifesto points that you think, right, it's going to help push, in your view, society in the right direction?
One of our key points is the family.
Right.
Okay, we recognise that not only is marriage down, not getting as married as much as we used to, but the family has been under grave attack. So one of our main policies is trying to encourage people to get married, stay married and have children. So we've got a policy, in fact, one of our key manifesto promises is to actually provide a grant, give a grant to first-time marriages, you know, first marriages, provide them with a grant as an incentive to get married, as long as they have marriage counselling before they get married.
Right.
Things like a £12,000 grant. And then, once they're married, their first child within that marriage, they'll get a further grant. So this is tackling the very foundations of our society, which have been under grave attack, you know, within the last, I would say, 10, 15 years. The family, that family unit, the nuclear family, is the foundation. And we have that policy in place to protect and encourage people to get married and have children within that marriage.
What do you think what policies have softened the importance of the marriage and the family unit?
Of course, we've got the no-fault divorce.
Right.
That's, part of the Conservative government's, policies that was very anti-Conservative. I don't know even why that even came out of the Conservative Party, but we've got the no-fault divorce, which is very harmful for marriage, because now you can just get divorced on a whim. You don't need to have a cooling-off period for, I think it's 3 years. Now you can just get divorced for any reason whatsoever. It don't have to be like irreconcilable differences. You can just get divorced. Where's the incentive to work?
So I just want to balance something from your story and your stance on divorce. I'm divorced as well, so I have no judgment.
Yes, so am I. I've been divorced.
Yeah. So where do you stand on that? That if you're either in an abusive relationship or you're in a challenging situation, in one hand, this is the cognitive dissonance of being a human is like, well, I believe that marriage is what God wants and it's the best container for family and for life and for children, and yet we find ourselves getting out of one. So there are sort of exceptions,
of course,
to the rule. So how do you balance that with a policy that advocates for it but then taking away the option of, like, I guess if you could have got away from your ex-husband as quickly as possible, as cheaply as possible with a no-fault divorce. I'm just challenging your position a little bit.
The no-fault divorce part, getting away from my ex-husband, this person, like for me, for
yeah,
one
sure,
second,
yeah,
wasn't necessarily the issue. It was the getting away.
right,
The divorce part can come later.
right.
You understand? When you're in an abusive relationship, the getting away part is
It's
more
the
important.
hard part. I understand.
Yeah, it's not the divorce.
No, but you then still have to have a legal process.
You do.
Where you kind of have to engage with somebody you don't want to engage with anymore.
There is that, but we're talking about exceptions.
Right.
Okay, it's like the abortion issue. Okay, so what do you do about the rape or the incest? Okay, the rape and the incest are about 2% of abortions. Okay, I'll settle for saving 98% of babies.
Right.
We can put aside, for now, my CPA's policies, my own policies, 100% life, saving every life. However, for
in a
now,
modern world, there's compromise.
Exactly. For now, let's put aside the 2%. I'll settle for saving the 98. Okay.
I think it's really good though to hear, a politician speak like that, because you often only get, the polarized view, and actually when I've met politicians, they're never polarized. I've sat with Anne Widdecombe, I've sat with other politicians who actually seem like they have real strong policy positions, because they do, but actually they know that in reality there'll be nuance and detail and context to these decisions where, policies have to work out through the lives and actions of people. I just wanted to hear, people to hear that you've got strong views, and I like that, but you're willing to compromise as well, I think.
You have to negotiate. Life is about negotiation. Relationships are about negotiation.
Yeah.
And in politics, it's the same. You have your core values. Right. Your core values are your core values. That's it. Right. We're not moving on those. Right. But in order to get to our desired point, there's going to be a process. Like, it's like with abortion. I mean, we can't just... We would like to completely just, overturn, or I forget what the term is, but repeal the 1967 Abortion Act. But we can't do it immediately.
No, it's going to take time.
It's going to take time. Exactly, it's a process. It's a process. So, like another example, we'd like to repeal the same-sex marriage bill. That'll be a process. We can't just do it straight away. It's going to be a process.
So what do you think for couples that are same-sex and, don't know God, so therefore live in a reality where, it's fine, And I think if you live in that world, that, I agree with that, If you don't know God, why would you care if you were sinning? That's, like, I can get that mentality, Like when me and you were far away from God at some point,
of course.
Around sex before marriage, all the sins that you and I have created, and judge the sin, not the sinner, right? So from the perspective of like two men or two women that want to be together, should there be something else? Like, what because I guess we're protecting the biblical version of marriage, but in society, what is the container for those people?
We've already got civil partnerships.
Right.
It afforded them
So it already exists, yeah.
every benefit that marriage did. So why did they want the same-sex
That's a great
marriage?
question. Why?
Why? The civil partnership gave them all the benefits. So why did they want the marriage? Because they wanted to denigrate the agenda, I would say. The people, the individual people, I'm not going to judge them, but the agenda of the LGBT lobby movement wanted to denigrate marriage, wanted to demote it. They wanted to muddy the waters, as it were, because in the same-sex marriage bill, it had to completely redefine what marriage is. Completely. I mean, there's no consummation anymore because you can't consummate with two men, two women, can you? So even that had to be completely taken out. And when you look at biblical marriage, it really is the consummation. That's the actual marriage. So it completely took it out of the biblical context and turned it into something completely different. So,
which I guess is the issue for most of the issues that we're talking about today. Is it's when people try to choose morality instead of God choosing morality, it gets a bit messy and there's no continuity.
Absolutely.
Because, you know, my experience is I've got plenty of friends who are same-sex attracted and they don't agree with maybe the LGBTQ lobbying and position. In fact, they want to distance themselves from some of it because they're like, well, that's not me, because they too want inclusion and they know what my beliefs are, and yet we still have dinner together and you know, we discuss our positions and at the end of the day we love each other, you know, and that's a core tenet of my faith, at least, is, you know, to love my neighbour as I love myself.
Absolutely.
And so these political issues, I guess, are about how do we re-include the Christian part of society, you know, because I don't think you'll change anybody's mind. You know, if you're gay, you're gay, right? So I don't think by changing the law it'll change their mind. I don't think, you know, by us saying God thinks this, God thinks that. I think that we now live in a society where that's going to be completely separate, but we do have to find a position for us as Christians to not be fired from their job for saying what they believe in.
Exactly, and this is where the rubber meets the road, isn't it?
Do you know when you wrote your manifesto and you got to point 3, did you like just write it down because you're like, oh, I just believe in this? Like, or was it great consideration? Like, because you knew that must have been fire. You must have known that was going to be fire.
Yeah, I think it might ruffle a few feathers. But I lifted that directly from our manifesto.
Right.
It wasn't even something I penned myself.
Right.
Of course, I believe in it, but it came directly from our manifesto.
Right.
So it was like cut and paste.
Yeah, so you it's not like you wrote that or you were trying to be...
No, not really.
No.
I just thought, oh, that'd be good. I'll put that in.
Yeah, right, yeah.
But I knew it would be kind of controversial in some sense. I didn't put it in there to be controversial.
No.
I put it in there because that's what I really believe.
Right.
And I think as a Christian party, as well as dealing with all the local issues of my manifesto, which they were like fly tipping and all the other things you would include in there, there had to be something in there that represented morally where we stood as a party. Something very fundamental like the family and marriage, I thought really represented that. It was very fundamental.
So what's next for Maureen?
What's next? Well, at the moment, I'm doing quite a bit of media, like here.
Welcome.
Yeah. So I'm actually preaching engagements. I've preached at a church in Essex just recently. So next for me will be, next year's going to be a very busy year for us. We've got the London Assembly elections. We've got the general election next year. The London Assembly elections, or the mayoral elections, the two go hand in hand, are definitely going to be in May 2nd. And the general election, they're sort of estimated around October-ish. It's not set in stone. We don't actually know actually when the general election is going to be, but it has to be by the end of next year, we know that. So next for me, I'm planning to run for a seat on the general, or the London Assembly next year. And the London Assembly, I don't know what it is. It is a group of 25 elected members that hold the mayor to account in London only. Right. So you've got the mayoral elections, and whoever's elected mayor is mayor. But then there's these 25 people from different parties and different constituencies that hold the mayor to account. They could be from any party, etc., etc. But the nice thing about the London Assembly elections is the proportional representation.
Right.
You only need to get 5% of the vote to actually be an elected member.
For your party to have a seat in the
exactly.
House.
So this really provides us with a great opportunity. So, and I based the numbers that I have in my head that I presented to my party at our assemblies. In 2011 census, there were 3 million Christians in London alone. 3 million. Just let that settle. 3 million. So, in order to get a seat on the London Assembly, according to the last London Assembly or mayoral elections, we need about 100,000 votes.
Right.
I think we can manage that.
Yeah.
Out of 3 million Christians.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. Yeah.
Definitely.
And so, like, how are you going to do that? Because bringing the church together around simple things is hard, let alone voting for a new party.
There was a plan. There's a plan. So what I'm doing is I've got some connections with some very key leaders in the Black church. And I say the Black church because the Black church is more open. Ironically, they're still more open to hearing or supporting a Christian party, even though they tend to vote Labour. Once they hear what Labour's about, they quickly switch. It's just about educating them and letting them know what's really going on in these other parties. So I do have some key contacts in the Black church, which I've already reached out to in order to give me access, or the party I should say, not just myself, access to key organisations and congregations in London. So the plan is, I want to go top down this time because I find that when you approach these churches directly yourself, they tend to ignore you because they don't know you. You don't have any.
And they're busy and they're trying to do a good job, and they've got 1,000 Maureens asking them for 1,000.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So in order to get someone, to get access rather, if someone with influence gives you access or recommends you, that gives you more of an opportunity to at least let them hear you out, as it were. So that's the plan, and it is working. So we're putting together some promo videos.
Good. Well, we'll all be praying for you, and if there's anything we can do, you need to let us know. So you're here today, Maureen, because of Christian Concern. So they've introduced you to God TV, so we're really grateful to them. Just explain to people at home, like, who are Christian Concern, and, like, you know, how do you work with them? Right,
so Christian Concern organisation that really deal with matters that concern Christians, basically. The arm of Christian Concern I'm involved with is the Christian Legal Centre.
Right.
They are the legal side of Christian Concern. So when a Christian has an issue like I had with my former employer, that I was being persecuted for my Christian beliefs, the Christian Legal Centre steps in with legal advice, legal support. That the person like myself, or the plaintiff, as it were, doesn't have to pay for their legal counsel. So they operate on their charity, they operate on donations. So anyone who's listening to this, please donate to them. They're an excellent organisation. So they support anyone like myself with legal advice, legal counsel, legal representation, so they can bring a case and be supported in getting justice because they're being persecuted, basically.
Yeah, and they do some advocacy as well, I think, as well.
Yes.
So I guess you being here is part of their,
exactly,
advocacy to let people, around the world know what's happening, in the UK and and in politics and in the workplace, because the interesting thing is it wasn't the political party or the council really that did anything. It was your employer, and they picked up on something that had nothing to do with work as well, really, which is very strange.
Exactly.
Maureen, is there anything you want to say to people at home, or something you think you should say that we've like not said, or something that you think's really key that you just want to share with people at home?
Yeah, mainly that anyone else who's experiencing the sort of persecution in the workplace that I had experienced, or even if they're feeling intimidated about speaking out or expressing their religion at work. I know it's difficult for people because they think I can lose my job, it's my livelihood, etc., etc. But my piece of advice to you is, even though you might not feel comfortable in speaking out, at least make the decision not to go along with or agree with things that they might require you to do in the workplace that do go against your values. For instance, pronouns on emails. I know it sounds a small thing, but it makes a difference to you internally to know that I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to agree with this particular policy that the company are trying to force us to do. Make a stand, because it does make a difference to you internally that you've decided not to agree with it because of your values. And it makes you stronger internally when you do that. Because the more you concede, the weaker you become. And that's the problem. The more you agree to their silly little, internal policy, you can't do this, can't do that, make a stand and say, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to agree with this. It may not be as far as, stepping out to the point where you lose your job, but at least internalise and say, I'm not going to agree with this. I'm not going to do it because I'm a Christian. And I refuse to put my pronouns on my emails. It's silly. Why would I do that? It may be a small gesture, but it makes a difference to you internally. So that's what I wanted to say.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I just want to encourage anyone at home that if you're struggling with similar issues to Maureen, get in touch. I'm not saying that we as God TV can help, but we absolutely will know the organisations that can stand with you and support you. Maureen, the last thing is before I thank everybody, is could you just pray for the people at home? Pray to encourage them, and pray for anybody that is suffering persecution in the workplace. Definitely.
Shall I look at that camera?
Yeah. Go for it.
Yes, Lord, we pray for those listening right now. We thank you that they are your children and that they want to do what's right by you, Lord. We thank you for the opportunity for them to know who you are and have an understanding that you are with them at all times, and not to be afraid or not to be fearful of what their employer can do to them. Because, Father, you are ultimately our source. So I pray for the people listening right now, Father, that they are strengthened even by this conversation, that they realise that there is someone out there, even if it's Christian Legal Centre or any other organisations that support Christians, they are not alone in their struggle, in their pursuit of truth and being able to express their faith and their religion freely wherever they are. So I thank you right now for being with us all in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Maureen, thank you. Thank you for joining us. Really appreciate it.
It's been my pleasure.
Yeah, your kindness and your honesty and your willingness to come today. And to everybody at home, I just want to thank the God TV team. We've got with us Lloyd, David and Noah, who are helping us film, and this won't be possible without them, and also all the God TV team in the background that are going to be editing and posting and sharing with you. So if you can do your part, we'd absolutely love that. That's share, like and comment. It just helps us get Maureen and her story out further and faster, because the algorithm quite likes it when you like, share and comment. So please do that. We thank you, we bless you, and we'll see you next time on God TV together.